Ryan Cordes show, South Africa is a movie.
Welcome to the watch party!
They're still awake, and so are you. And I'm really glad that you are, because new crime stats came out for the first quarter of South Africa's 2025, from the 1st of January to the 31st of March. As you know, South Africa's crime statistics are up for a lot of debates. We just spoke at length about femicide and gender-based violence. You have been hearing at length about farm murders and white genocide and all of this mess about who is actually the victims of crime and who is not. Is South Africa getting safer? Are new policing policies working to cut down on crime, or are they not? And so I thought I'd just get an expert to come and do all of the good yapping for us. Even that water bottle is excited. Please welcome Gareth Newham from the Institute of Security Studies, who's here to speak with us. Thank you so much for being here. So let's just dive right into the crime stats. The only ones that I know about are the fact that there were 5,227 murders, I think it was, and that 6 of them involved people on farms. But that was basically all that I know about from the first quarter. So tell me, from your learned perspective, what are the highlights of the new crime statistics that were released last week?
Well, I think the highlights are that we're starting to hopefully see a downturn in violent crime. So virtually all the violent crime categories showed quite big decreases. Now, that's important because murder in South Africa dropped for the first 18 years of our democracy. We had a murder rate around 70 or 69 murders per 100,000 people in 1994. And by 2012, we were sitting at 30 murders per 100,000. It's about a 55% drop. There are very few countries in the world that have seen such a large decline in murder.
Sure.
Murder is the most accurate crime statistic because there's bodies and there's multiple systems that count the bodies. So
Okay.
we look at murder to get a sense of violence in South Africa. Then from 2012, the state capture well underway and a concerted attack on the criminal justice system to prevent people being held accountable for mass theft of public funds. The criminal justice system started to flounder really badly. Intelligence was completely compromised. The police were not given clear directions. And we saw murder going up. And so it's been going up pretty much every single year for the last 12 years.
Wow.
Big increases. We're so going back towards 46, 47 murders per 100,000. That's thousands of people. So that we were reaching almost 27,000, 28,000 murders in a single year.
Wow.
And then what we saw about a year or so ago is this starting to slow down. And in the last crime quarter statistics for the first 3 months of this year, it's a huge 12.5% drop, a double-digit drop, which is quite astonishing. We haven't seen anything like that in quite some time. So that's the good news.
That's kind of crazy. I don't know if you guys feel this right now, but like for me, crime is just this big thing that happens. And because of the last 10, 12 years in South Africa, it almost feels like it just happens irrespective of what anybody tries to do about it. But it sounds like, clearly from what you just said, national trends of policy and decision-making from leaders in politics and then in police actually demonstrably affect crime statistics, even things like murder, which sounds obvious. I know it should happen, but it just doesn't feel like anybody's been able to do anything about crime for such a long time. Is it really just from your analysis, state capture happened, policing was corrupted, Justice Department was scrambled, and now there's a slow moment of turnaround?
Yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that. We can't for certain say at this moment that this big change is because of anything that's happened in policing or in policy, unfortunately, at this point. There are lots of things going on. There's a lot of hard work behind the scenes, trying to get the institutional strengthening and trying to fix the problems of these institutions over time. It's a very slow and difficult job. But big crime trends and national crime trends, or even provincial crime trends, are often more associated with structural and systemic issues in the society.
Oh, I see.
So you can have big changes because of growth in economy, sudden more employment going on, or the number of people who have been open to committing crime, which is always a very small proportion of any society, have just reached that level that there's not more people wanting to do it.
Oh, I see.
So what you might find is that we've hit a saturation point over the last 12 years, that everybody who is going to go around killing people or acting in a really bad has done it or is doing it. And there are certainly 2,000 to 3,000 convictions for murder every year, so that might be whittling down on that cohort of people who are willing to do it. There's not, if we have 27,000 murders in South Africa in a year, that's not 27,000 murderers.
Yes,
that's a
fewer.
far smaller number of people that will commit. Usually, when we see Gauteng, which records a large proportion of the murders in South Africa, it's largely robberies.
Okay.
So it's young men with firearms, usually robbing people in their homes, businesses, car hijackings, or on the streets. And if the person resists, they get shot and killed.
Sure.
So that's kind of one big driver of murder in Gauteng. So if you get on top of robbery, you'll get on top of murder
Murders.
as well.
That's so interesting. Man, I'm glad I invited you. Okay. So what else should we look at from the crime stats beyond murder from the first quarter in 2025?
Well, it shows, I mean, there are really only 2 crime categories that still show an increase, and both those crime categories are incredibly underreported.
Okay.
So one is rape and sexual assault. We saw increases there. And that's quite interesting because that kind of crime can fluctuate quite dramatically without anything really changing.
Right.
The reporting rates are very low. So if for some people they start thinking that the police station where they live is more likely to record the crime, help them out, you could see big increases in reporting. But at the same time, it could actually mean that it is actually going up.
Right.
And that the small number of people who actually do report it, there's just more victims.
It's interesting that what you say, because like that sounds to me like if people have a perception that the police will do a good job, they're more likely to report something like sexual assault or all kinds of crimes, which then means you discover way more crimes are happening.
Yeah, that's why we had the strange anomaly in the first, say, 10 years of our democracy. We started to see murder going down, but all the crime stats going up. And people thinking that means crime's going up. But actually what was happening was that there was this huge investment into community policing.
Right.
Changing the uniforms, training police officers to provide a service, trying to change the culture, which meant that this early surveys up until about the mid-2000s showed that people were, when they went to a police station, were quite pleasantly surprised that somebody would speak to them in their own language, help them out, you get a document certified, if you reported a crime, somebody would give you a case number. And so then we just saw greater reporting rates. So it was really uncovering crime that's already there.
Right.
And that's what's so dangerous, to use crime statistics as a measure of police performance.
Right.
It's really a measure of the workload that they're facing. And it can really go up and down for reasons that have got nothing to do with policing. So if you suddenly have one big police precinct and you suddenly build another police station, it looks like crime's halved in the one.
Yeah.
And then you sort of say, well done, but this police station's seen crime going up. It's not like that. So we really quite carefully, we look at crime stats very carefully. We don't just make assumptions about, is they going up or down, is it a good or bad thing? The only statistic really that can tell you that is the murder. Because, as I say, there's independent ways of assessing that.
Okay, sorry. So, I mean, there's somewhere else I want to go, but before I get there, so from the crime stats of the last quarter, rape and sexual assault went up, and one other thing went up. Is that right?
There's your commercial crime, so fraud, online fraud, any kind of commercial. There's a whole range, about 50 different categories, but that's going up, and that's also highly underreported.
Right.
So when banks have internal fraud, they don't really like to advertise this. They don't always necessarily, and not just banks, insurance companies, private security companies themselves. When they do experience some kind of compromise situation where they lose money, they don't like going to the police. So we know that it's quite a low reporting rate. I think it's around 15% of actual fraud being reported to the SAPs.
Wow.
And also it's quite a complex crime, especially if it's happening online. So the police themselves are not necessarily trained or have the technology immediately available at a station to help you. So that kind of really shows that that's probably just more reporting.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. So there was a huge fight this weekend online in the South African various communities because obviously there's been this huge manhunt to try and catch the suspects who could have been involved in the killing of Olorato Mongale in Sandton last week. One suspect was found in Amanzimtoti, and according to the police reports, fired in defense or like fired on the police trying to escape. There was a shootout and the suspect was killed. Another suspect's face was put all over the media and then was arrested. And then the police said, psych, actually, he's not the one, and released him. And he's now had to do a media tour to tell everyone that he's innocent, to like make sure everyone knows because of all of the putting out his identity that the police did. But the real question here then is, well, if they got that suspect wrong, they shot a suspect just a few days ago. Was that the right one? And at the same time, General Mkhwanazi, in KZN, one of the big police guys there, law enforcement guys, has become a bit of a national hero in South Africa, and you can understand why. We're all so beset by crime that we just want some big, brutish policeman to go and shoot and scare the criminals, and police killings in KZN have skyrocketed like last week. And so I wanted to ask you, does aggressive, conflict-heavy willingness to shoot policing cause crime rates to drop? Does it intimidate would-be criminals, does it cause them to think once or twice or a little bit extra and maybe even not commit crimes?
Look, this is a huge area of debate, and certainly from the police side, it's not a debate. If you are facing dangerous criminals that want to shoot at you, you have to defend yourself and shoot back, and if some of them die, it's too bad. But beyond that, there is a belief that you've got to really be aggressive and go for the criminals, and that's not unique to South Africa. That's a kind of a policing mentality because of the nature of the job.
Yeah.
However, there's not real research that shows that that actually is the case. There is, however, evidence from particularly the United States and some other places where they've got much better resources to do this kind of research, that when the police are seen as being heavy-handed, then the criminals are more likely to be violent quicker. In other words, if they think the police do adhere to human rights, and they're just going to arrest us, we'll take our chances in court, we'll get lawyers, whatever, they don't shoot at the police.
Right.
If they think the police are going to shoot and kill them, they do shoot at the police more quickly. And so it actually can make it more dangerous to be a police officer. And you could actually see increases in police shootings of police by criminals. So, again, it's also one of those things that if the public start believing that the police are taking the law into their own hands, then more people in the public start taking the law into their own hands.
Oh, interesting.
And you start having increased vigilantism. And we really got a situation in South Africa that over 1,000 people are murdered every year through vigilante action.
Wow.
Where community groups or people think, we know those people are committing crimes, they might or might not be, but decide they're going to blame them, and then they brutalize them. And so there's tens of thousands of people get injured, but about 1,000 or more die from that. So it's kind of a path you don't really want to go down. You want your law enforcement capability or police agencies to be seen as upholding the law, upholding everybody's rights. They're not there to be the judge, jury, and executioner because they do get it wrong.
Yeah.
Because they're also relying on people giving them information. You might have beefs. I don't like my neighbor, I'm going to blame them for something.
Yeah.
Or I've got a score to settle and I'm going to make an affidavit saying that person's involved in X, Y, and Z. And if the police arrive there and decide we've got the right people and shoot them, it's too late. There's nothing you do to take that back. So it's a very dangerous area to go for the police. And that's why generally in most democracies, in most human rights-oriented societies that claim to believe in human rights, it's a no-no.
Okay.
You'd rather arrest the suspects, prove it in court, link them to other crimes. That sends a very strong message out there.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I just learned so much. I'm overwhelmed. Make some noise for Gareth Newham from the DStv Security Service, everybody. Thank you so much.